Rob asked. I have no idea, Anton said. Some kind of god figure. But I think there's a good chance that this man you saw in the window is this vessel character, or someone equally as dangerous. We don't know. That's my point. If it's some kind of insane pain cult that's after us, the more we know about them, the better off we'll be. That book could mean the difference between life and death. Rob let out a slow breath and looked at Annie and Tabby. What do you think? He asked. Annie seemed to be weighing the options. I think Anton's right, she said at last. I really don't look forward to being caught with our pants down if these people are really after us. Okay, he said at last. We go for the book then. But once we have it, we lock ourselves in. Agreed? He looked to the two women. They both nodded their agreement. He rubbed his hands together before opening the door a crack to peer through. Looking back at Anton, he said, If going after this goddamn book gets my ass killed, I'm telling you now, I'm personally coming back and haunting you. Anton nodded nervously, but smiled just the same. Rob motioned to them that it was safe to move out into the hall, and led them out. The school seemed different to them now, much more akin to the nightmarish place described in the wives' tales about Kettle Creek. Every shadow seemed to hold dark secrets, every corner a possible ambush from some unearthly horror. They were constantly looking over their shoulders and mistaking the echoes of their own footfalls for the telltale signs that something was following them. They slinked back to the teacher's lounge at a snail's pace, and it seemed to take them a lifetime. But in the end, the trip was an uneventful one. Nothing appeared to harass them. But once inside, they were quick to lock the door just the same, a feeling of relative safety returning. They spent most of the rest of the morning looking through the strange text and discussing what they found there. It described strange religious practices, usually with torture and mental torment at their core. It spoke often of the pain god, Sotek, and a pantheon of lesser deities that seemed to be part of his mythos. Possibly most disturbing of all, it said that Sotek himself was a prisoner inside the small pyramid-like artifact it called the claustrum, and which they had not 5 feet from them. If the text was to be believed, his essence had been sealed away long ago and waited for his vessel to come to return him to the world of flesh. In the end days, those willing to sacrifice their minds and bodies to him would be rewarded with eternal life. This book's got everything but a Kool-Aid recipe, Rob stated at one point. Annie was eyeing the claustrum uneasily. She did not believe herself to actually think there was anything paranormal or dangerous about the small metal pyramid. Why then did its presence make her so nervous? Steve had mentioned that it appeared to have been broken at some point in the past. One of the sides was made of a different metal and unarticulated. She felt herself both horrified by and drawn to the object. While focusing on it, it almost seemed to call, to throb with some inner power. Annie, Anton was saying, are you okay? Huh? Yeah, she said. I guess I zoned out there for a second. He simply nodded and went back to discussing something with Rob. But she wasn't so sure that she was okay. Her eyes were watering, involuntarily, and she could feel an ache deep in her stomach. Had the claustrum touched her in some way? She shuddered and forced herself to look away from it. The vessel, the book had said, was a remorseless killer, forged in fire. She wondered if it meant that literally. Had the vessel played some part in the blaze that had destroyed the original school? It seemed to make sense, but that was 40 years ago. Even if the vessel was a teenager at the time, it would make him close to 60 years old. The huge shape she had seen in the window earlier that night had not moved like an older man. What about the strange insects they found alongside the book? The things the text had called entomon machina. What was their purpose? And if they weren't motorized, why did they have moving parts? There was a great deal that still remained a mystery, and it didn't seem that the text explained nearly as much as Anton had hoped. Before long, he remained the only one still reading, unable to admit that it contained nothing useful. "There has to be something here that can help us," he told the room at large. "It looks like it was written as a sort of ritual book," Annie remarked. "More as a resource for the cult than as a guide to what they do and who they are." Rob nodded in agreement. "Steve died because he was alone. If we stay here, and stay together, we'll be fine." Anton was finally forced to concede, but as he closed the tome, a small scrap of paper slipped from between its pages and helicoptered to the floor. Anton bent down and picked it up, looking at it quizzically. "What is it?" Tabby asked. "It's an address. 2450 Main Street." "What's on the main road in this town?" "Shops, civic buildings, an old hospital," Rob said. "What do you think it means?" "No idea. Wait, shut up." "What?" Rob asked. But Anton had put his hand up and pointed at the door. Then he heard it. They all heard it. Someone was trying to open the locked door. The handle jiggled from side to side, and then ceased. "Who's there?" Anton said in a voice like a cracking preteen. "Are you the police?" There was a pause, and then something large on the other side of the door crashed its weight against it, making the wood buckle in its frame. Boom! They all drew back, throwing frightened glances at one another. Again, the door gave a loud shudder as something slammed it from the other side. Boom! "That thing's not gonna hold," Rob yelled in sudden terror. He looked quickly around the room for something to reinforce the door. The room was completely empty except... He ran to the bathroom and threw wide the door. He needed something to pop the pins from the hinges, but he didn't have time. "Anton!" he yelled, but the other stayed rooted in place, just staring at the door leading to the hallway. Boom! "Anton, help me!" he yelled again, breaking the other's trance. Anton scrambled over to Rob, who was kicking wildly at the open bathroom door by its lower hinge. "What do you want me to do?" Anton asked, not wanting to get in his way. "I don't know," Rob said. "Hold on to the door handle so I can get a solid kick." Anton held onto the door so that it would not simply bounce against the back wall. Rob's first kick simply tore it from his grip, but it did make a sizable splintering indentation in the flimsy wood, just to the left of the hinge. Thankfully, the outside door seemed to be made of tougher stuff, as it still held firmly in its frame. Rob's second kick splintered the wood free from the bottom hinge. Rob then grabbed a hold of the door firmly by the handles, and with a lurch, tore it free of the top hinge as well. The door came free and immediately toppled to one side, crashing to the floor. Boom! "Help me brace it against the other door," he told Anton. Together, they tried to brace it sideways under the door handle. But it was immediately obvious that the width of the bathroom door was just not tall enough to make a substantial brace. "What are you doing, Rob?" Tabby asked. "Hey, I'm fucking trying here. What are you doing?" He spat over his shoulder at her. "What if you do it lengthwise?" Annie suggested. "The angle's too extreme," he said. "I thought of that first, but it would just fall to the floor." Boom! "So break some of it off," she said. Rob nodded. That could work. He put the door at an angle between the wall and the floor, and came down hard, near the bottom. A piece snapped off in a jagged half-smile, about a foot from the bottom. It was a sloppy job, but it did the trick. The remaining piece of wood was just short enough to wedge firmly underneath the handle and make sure the thing outside would have a hard time getting in. They could do nothing more than simply huddle together and hope that their makeshift brace held. Boom! Boom! The thing outside seemed unwilling to give up. It knew they were in there, and it wanted to get to them. There was no longer any question that whoever or whatever was out there was after them. Boom! The minutes passed excruciatingly. Twice, Rob had to readjust the brace as it began to slip from place, and the lounge door was beginning to bow unsettlingly. Their safe haven began to feel more and more like a cage with each passing minute. You've been listening to Ambuscade, Book 1 of The Pain Chaser, written and performed by Patrick E. Malloy. If you like what you've heard, you can buy your own copy of the book at www.patrickemalloy.com. That's Patrick, the letter E, Molloy All music for this production was written and performed by Raymond Jelly. And I'd also like to personally thank fellow writer-podcaster Nathan Lowell for all his help in getting this production started. Until next time, enjoy the nightmares.